Hey gang, welcome to Save Times with Automations in SharePoint. So we're going to look at two different workflow templates, which is part of Power Automate, to do a couple of different things. So the first one that we're going to look at is I've got the SharePoint site here. I've put in some files and I've added some columns, a status column, assigned to, and deadline column. The first thing we're going to do is create an automation that when I select this file, will automatically send a message to a channel within Teams that I'm working on with, and it will include the link and whatever little blurbage I want to throw in there as well. So I don't have to do a copy, paste, move it over. I can just do it by right-clicking on the document. The second thing we're going to do is I'm going to take this document, I'm going to send it to whoever is into the assigned here. So these could be different people. When I right click on it and choose this workflow, it's going to send an email to that person with a link to this document, because I want this faculty member who it's been assigned to come in and make changes to the document. I also want to update the status here as I move through these different steps. So this is going to automatically change this to a status. I don't have to manually do it myself. We'll basically duplicate that same workflow, except for this time it'll be an overdue notice to the faculty member, as well as it will change this item here to overdue. And then finally, we will send a message to a manager for approval. Now, the approval tool that's built into Microsoft Teams allows us to either use Teams or the email client to approve this document. It's actually built into here. If I wanted to go to the three dots here in the SharePoint, there is under Automate a request sign-off function. I could use that, but it does not update the status here. And I want to make sure that I have the status updated, because that way anyone that comes into this document library can see what's going on with that file in the process. So that's what we're going to accomplish today. So I'm going to close this off because that's my sample, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what Power Automate does and what a document library is. So let's talk about document libraries. Document libraries are part of SharePoint. And if you take a look at this site that I'm looking at now, a SharePoint site, we have a number of document libraries that live in here. The one you're most familiar with is the Documents folder. This is the place where, when you're using in Teams, it will create a folder in there for each of the channel you create, so general or whatever the channel topic is, and it will create folders into that document library. The thing is, all the files get loaded into there. For most of you who are doing the programs and stuff, this is where your program information or your department information has also been stored into the document library. What we're going to do is we're going to create new document libraries. Now, the only people that have access to do this are going to be owners of a SharePoint site. So if you don't see this functionality, you're not going to be able to do it. It's really easy. You go over to the site contents, or you can come under the gear here and select site contents, still bring you to this page, and then you'll be able to add the columns and stuff there. Typically, with the departments that you're working on right now or in right now, you don't see the left-hand menu. We've actually hidden them at McEwen, so you don't need to worry about those and just work in the documents. But we're now going to show you how you can expand that area and do more work with it. So why would we want new document libraries? Well, the document library is where you are going to store different files that might have different sharing permissions. Those columns that we saw earlier, they are for the whole document library. So if I have folders within this documents folder and I put in a column in there, that column is going to appear for every file and folder all the way through. You might not need those items involved there. So in that case, you might as well create another document library. The document library also, as we create these Power Automate workflows, also are assigned at the document library level. So every folder inside there will have access to those Power Automations. You might not want that. So typically, if there's a group of type of documents you're working on, you'd want to create a document library. So I've created one here. I'm just going to go into this. And this is pretty much standard what everyone sees right now. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some new columns. So I'm just going to go over here and copy some information here really quickly so we can see this. Whoa. There we go. And let me just take a look at what's here. So if you go to the drop-down menu here, you can take a look at the files or folders or whatever, but you can sort that view from A to Z or Z to A. You can create filter or add filters on them, and all this stuff is temporary. So unlike working with Excel spreadsheets or stuff like that, or Google Sheets, if you start working with these, they're going to affect everyone that's looking after it. These are only going to be applied to your view as you're working on them. Now you can, we're going to go over here, add a column, and we're going to create a status. Now what we want is a choice list, so we're going to start with that. And I'm going to call this status. So there's my type as choice, and then I just go in here and I'm going to label all the different choices that I want. So I'll come back here in a second and change some different colors. And that should get me to where I want. So in progress, I'm going to change the color here. It's going to be green. Sent to faculty, overdue. That's a dark one because it's overdue. We're angry. Sent for approval. I'll make it orange. And actually, I'm going to take this one and make it blue. I don't know why, but blue for me means work. And then completed is green. We're done. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Before I save it, just scroll down to the bottom here. There's more options. You can take a look at these things. You can do a drop-down menu or a radio button. If you do a radio button, you can have multiple selections, but a drop-down, the multiple selections won't work. And you can require this to either contain unique information or does it have to have any kind of information, and you can kind of set those up. And every column type has a different set of options in there. Now, I always get this message that pops up here, and if I try clicking off to the side, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But notice, there's our status. Excellent. Let's add another column. This time, we are going to be looking at a person, because we're going to be assigning this to someone. So we'll assign to, so whoever's been working on this. If they have profile pictures, yeah, let's see their picture if we want. Again, there's other options here. You can have multiple people entered in there. So I could have 2 or 3 people. I could require these to be unique or that does contain something. As I mentioned before, we'll go through that. And I'm just going to click on the checkbox to get rid of that. And then last one is going to be a date and time because I want to throw in a deadline. When does this need to be done? Do we need that? No. Friendly format. What that does is if tomorrow's date, if tomorrow is the date, it just says tomorrow. It doesn't give you an actual date. I prefer to leave it unfriendly, if that's a word I can use here. But there we go. There are my different columns. So I'm going to go inside this folder. And remember, these columns are being applied to all the different assets within the document library. All right, so I want to start editing this stuff. So there's 2 ways that we can edit. If I select the first item here and I go into the I here for details or information, I'm going to see those columns represented over the side here. So there's my status. So I'm going to put this in progress. And I'm going to assign this to the, just for now, I'm going to assign it to the test account that I'm working on right now. And I'm going to do a deadline here of next week. Do yourself a favor. You notice how it shows you saving there? Make sure it's finished saving before you close this. Otherwise, though, you'll have to go back in and re-enter all that information. So that way you can do this one at a time. I can also edit in grid view. So if I go to grid view here, just like a spreadsheet, and I can go in and enter stuff. What's also neat about spreadsheets, if I can go in, I can actually click and drag, and it will just do a fill down, if that's what I want to do. So I can quickly go through and do all that. I'm just going to take this one off just because I want to, and we'll just clear that off. When I'm done, exit the grid view, and then it's saved there. So now we've got our data, and these are using files. We're not using a Microsoft list, which is like a spreadsheet, but these are the files with extra metadata that's attached to that. I'm going to move this window over just so I can see a bit more. All right, so we're going to now take a look at our first flow. So the flow that we want to do is the one that's going to post to a team. So this person is part of the team called the Microsoft Teams Playground, and it's a channel there called Power Automate Training. And what I want to do is be able to post a message to here with the information. And in fact, you can see some examples here, feedback required test, and then there's the link to the document. And that's what we're going to do right now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Power Automate. So Power Automate is an app, and if you don't see it here right away, you just go to All Apps, search for it. And what I suggest doing is when you find it here, just click on the three dots here and open in the new tab. Otherwise, it's going to replace the tab you're working on now. So there's Power Automate. Here's where you go for all your workflows. You can go through and search a bunch of different resources. So there's, like here it says helpful resources. Down here, the learn is some learning tutorials and stuff. And that's pretty much what you're seeing down here. It's pretty much the same stuff. But how to get started, complex other security robot stuff that you can do. But we're going to do something very simple. With Power Automate, you can go in and you can basically say, hey, I want to, hang on a second, I'm trying to find the link I want to send a notice to somebody to say, hey, take a look at this. So there is an automation already created. I'm just going to copy it here. And it's called Post a Message to Microsoft Teams for a Selected File. So I'm going to go into there. Come on. So I'm actually going to go into let's go into templates. That's where I want to go. Try this again. Search for a template. Now, two things will show up. One says a selected file, one says the selected file. You want a selected file. This is the one that's got all the numbers, the higher numbers to it. And I'm going to launch this. Now, if you haven't used Power Automate for the before, you maybe see a different window here. And up in the top right-hand corner, it'll say sign in. So you just need to go ahead and sign in. Once you've done that, you should be able to go through the next steps. As we load up these different automations, they say, hey, you know what? We're going to use the SharePoint tool and the Microsoft Teams tool. Do I have permission to do that? You can just check off the box there, and you only need to do that once usually. Once you've done that, we're going to hit continue. So let's talk about the workflow that happens here. So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, find a file. Here's a file that I'm interested in. So for a selected file, here's a file I'm interested in. I want you to get the properties. The properties are the column information that we've added, who created, all that kind of stuff. And then I want you to post a message to a channel that I have in Microsoft Teams. Okay, pretty straightforward. Hopefully, when you click on this, you should see the address for all the SharePoint sites that you're part of. So here I can see the Power Automate training site that I'm part of. If it doesn't show up, sometimes the sites are at a sub-level and they don't work, just go to the SharePoint site you're working on, go to Home, and then select that URL up there. That's the home page for this site. And when you paste that into your automation, it will recognize it, it will go through, and it will find it for you. And then the next time you go looking for it, you should be able to see that right there. I'm just going to select this because it's there. Now, what's the library we're working in? Well, my document library, which is that instructor one. So I'm going to select that. So I'm basically saying, hey, here's a location. I'm going to pick a file in this location. Excellent. What do you want? I want you to get the file properties of the file in that location. So I have to repeat this again, which is kind of a pain, but this is pretty quick and dirty, so it's easy to do. And then by default, the template says, you know, hey, what's the ID number? Well, we'll grab the ID number because every file has a unique ID. What do we want to do with it next? Well, we're going to post this in the channel. Now, because I'm posting the channel and it's coming from me, I don't want a robot pretending to post this information on my behalf. I want it to come from me. So if someone replies or wants to know who posted this, they'll see it's me. So I switch that to user. There's my channel. What team is this part of? So this is going to be part of that Playground New. So that's the team I'm on. And I'm going to go into the channel. Here we go. Called Power Automate Training. So notice this is one website. This is a team that has nothing to do with this website. They're not connected at all. Okay, so I can post this to anywhere. And then there's a basic message that's set up here that's going to say, hey, whatever you enter as the message up here, put it there. Then there's a link to the file and stuff. So it's done this ahead of time. you have an option of putting in a subject line. Now for this kind of automation, I'm typically going to use it when I want feedback. So I'm just going to do feedback requested as the subject line. You don't have to, or you can create multiple automations where the subject line is completed. Totally up to you. So I'm going to save this. And once it's saved, we're going to do this flow checker. And the flow checker just kind of very high level goes, did you get everything we needed? And here we can see no warnings or errors. So let's run this. So I'm going back to my website here. So this is my instructor site. And you can refresh the screen, but it should be good here. I go to the three dots here. I'll click on this. I'll go to automate. And if you just wait a second, there's my message. Post a message to Microsoft Teams for a selected file. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to run that. Now, the first time I run this, again, I might have to give it permission and say, yes, it's okay to use these different tools that we're doing, which is SharePoint and Microsoft Teams, but you only have to do it the one time. Here's the automation. What message do I want to go with that file? Can someone review this by Friday? And when I go to Teams now, there's a message popped up here, but I go to Teams, there is the account, there's the subject line we put in, can someone review this by Friday, and then the link there. Now you can go into your automation here, and you can, the automation here, and you can customize the message here as much as you want. And as we go through, you'll get some better ideas. But this is the first step of what we're going to be doing to getting information about a file to send to somewhere else. One quick thing I do want to mention, up top here, when you create and use these templates, they keep the same name. So you have no idea after you've done this 5 or 10 times what this belongs to. So what I always recommend is if I'm working in a document library or a specific folder, I should have a naming convention where something at the very beginning puts it together. So because I'm working with social work function, I'm going to do SW2. Whoops, SW2. So every automation I create is going to have SW2, and I am going to put in and make it a usable title so that people know what we're talking about. So this time what I want to do is create an automation that's going to take a look at who's in the assigned to column, send them an email. And in the email, I'm going to throw in whatever text I want for my message, as well as a link to the document so that they don't have to go looking for it. They click on it and it opens up and works fine. I also want to change the status there to change to say that it's been sent out so that anyone else that comes along will know where the progress are, these files are. So we're basically going to do the same thing. But for Power Automate, instead of going to the Automate page, you can actually access it right from the folder you're in. So in this document library, I have a folder. We talked about that before. Make sure nothing is selected here. And if you go to the three dots here, you will see Automate. Sorry, you will see Integrate, and you're going to go to Power Automate. And you're going to create a flow. Now remember the flow we had before? It was called post a message to Teams. So what happens here in this flow, these are very commonly used flows that people often will take advantage of. And there's the first 5 of them. I'm just going to click on Show More, and there's the one that we used before. So I'm going to go ahead and fire that. Opens up exactly the same way we did before. And I'm going to do the continuation. And hopefully those items of giving permissions you shouldn't have to worry about. Okay, we've opened this up. The first thing I always tell people is when you're working with flows, change the title. Because there it is, that title is exactly the same as what we had before. So I'm going to go in and rename it. It was SW2. And this time we're going to, email person with linked to document. Something unique. Notice what's happened here though. Because I fired it off or started Power Automate from within the folder here on this in this document library, it's actually filled all that data out for me. I don't have to worry about it. So we have Power Automate, there's the instructor folder, it's all done for me. Now here's where we're going to do something different. I do not want to post this to a channel. I don't maybe have a channel with the person I'm working with. It might be someone that's just coming on for one project or something like that. So I'm just going to actually remove this by going to the three dots here. Now I'm going to add a new step. So when you're adding these different flows and stuff, it's based on applications and what commands are available in the application that you want to take advantage of. So the first step when you look at choose an operation is what application you want to do something with. Well, we want to email. So the application for that would be Outlook. Notice down at the bottom there, it shows you a couple of them. There's over 650 different applications that you can link to with Power Automate. Now, McEwen doesn't have them all set up, so you're only going to see a certain number of access to a certain number of them. But the big ones that we want to play with are the ones that are standard. So we're going to type in Outlook, and there's Outlook 365. And once I've said, hey, this is the app I want, notice it's changed there, what are the commands you want? And you can scroll down here, and you can see all sorts of different commands that you can take advantage of. In this case, we want send an email. So I'm going to add that into here. And now we can start building this out. I can start and just specify a specific person like, Trevor or Jim or Bob. But the problem is I actually want to grab whatever is in this here. So if there's a different name in each of these columns, I want you to go for this file, grab the name that's in that column for that file. To do that, we're going to use what's called add dynamic content. Now remember back here where we said select the file, then get the properties of the file. And the properties of the file are all these things here: modified, status, assigned to, deadline. And in fact, there's a lot more available if you just go to here and we can take a look under column settings, under show and hide columns. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that we can see here. So what you can, there's columns created that we're just not seeing them right now. But when we go and do this flow, that's going to ensure that we actually get able to take advantage of that. So I'm going to click on Add Dynamic Content. Here are all the different columns of information associated with either SharePoint or the file or anything like that that's in here. Well, we want the email for the person that this is assigned to. So that's the name of the column, assigned to. So I can go into Power Automate. And you can see here, because we're looking at an email function, these are only columns that have email, but there's assigned to email. So that's the person. Great, let's use that. The subject, we can put in whatever subject we want in there. I'm going to grab, what did I use there before? One moment, I have to figure out what I put in there before. Oh, course outline ready for update. Now, as far as the text goes, I'm just going to grab something that I had made available for. You basically want to create a template. That's what this is. It's like a merge letter, really. So here's what I want in there. Hey, instructor, your course outline name is ready for you to update. There's the deadline and then link. So it's going to pull all that information from those columns associated with that file. So the instructor is going to be the assigned to. So I could just type in assigned to. And I want the assigned to display name, person's name. Makes sense. Great. Your course outline, and this is the file. So let's just remove that. And I'm just going to type in file. And notice there's going to have get file properties and for a selected file. So we won't always work on this. But I want the file name for the selected file. So your course outline, blah, 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 is ready to update. Ensure changes are completed by whatever the deadline is. Again, it's a column, so we just type in the column, enter it in there. And then at the very end here, we're going to use a link. So there's already a piece here that links to the item, all right? And that's it. I'm going to save this. So this is going to take that file, and then it's going to send an email to whoever's assigned to it and let it run. Let's do the flow checker thing here. We'll close that. I'm going to save it again just to be on the safe side. And I'm going to go back over to this document. So I want to send an email here. And let's go ahead and do that. So there's my automate. Just give it a second. There's a second one, email person with a link to the document. That's what I want. Again, this is a new piece, so we're going to rerun it. So permissions, you only have to do it once. I'll hit continue. I'll throw a message in here, but the message doesn't work, and I'll show you why in a second. So hit run flow. And then what should happen in my email, as we can hear, course outline is ready, and there is the information. Now, I don't need to really add anything to this message because it's a template. So when we were editing before we had the team channel chat message, I took that out. There was a field called message there. So I could, if I want, go into here, go into my automation or under my dynamic content. I could type in message here and I could add a message there. But quite frankly, there's nothing for me to add. My template here is going to have everything into it already. So what I'm actually going to do is go up to here where the 3 dots are, and I'm going to delete that. I'm not going to use it because everything that needs to be said is going to be said in here. Well, we talked about 2 steps, right? We said that we were going to email it out and we want to change the status of this piece here to something different. So let's go look at this. So that's the next step. So this step is going to complete after the email is complete. If something happens and the email gets corrupted and doesn't get sent out, it's not going to change this. So all this stuff flows one after the other. The file, this piece here that we're working on, this is SharePoint. That's the app we're working on. So let's go in. Remember, we talk about choosing an app first. SharePoint. What's the command? Well, there's a whole bunch of them in here again, but the one we want is called, whoops, let me just click on SharePoint. There we go, SharePoint. There's a whole bunch of different commands. The ones we want is called update file properties. Not update a file, which means to upload a file or something, but update file properties. So we're going to go there. Now, at this point, we do have to go in and manually choose our site and our library. But again, it takes no time at all. And when it says, what is the item that you want? Well, guess what? That's the ID of the file. So I just go back into my dynamic content here. I'll type in ID. And notice it says get file properties or for a selected file. So you want to make sure you're grabbing the right one. So there's our file. And look, status, assigned, deadline. Those are all the columns that we created a little while ago. Let's go into status. I'm going to change my status. I'm going to say it's sent to the faculty person, and I'm going to save this. So we've added that second step. Let's run it. Just do the flow check real quick. Everything's good. Come over to here. I'm now going to go and pop this up, automate it. And remember that we had the message there as before. We took that out. So now we're just going to say, no, go ahead, run the flow. There's the email you just heard. So the email got sent in again. So there's the next email. And then what you might have to do, you might have to wait, but you can always just refresh the screen. And look at that, sent to faculty. How cool is that? So the next step is basically duplicating what we're doing, but we want to add an overdue notice to it. So we're going to have the subject line mention it's overdue, the message in the email is overdue, and we're going to change the status to represent overdue. I'm going to go back to my existing workflow that we have here, and we're going to go back up a level. And I'm actually going to go to my flows. So this will show me all the flows that I have. And you can see I've got a whole bunch of them. And notice on my SW2, which because this is the second one, they're all grouped together. That's why I was mentioning that having that naming convention. But this is the document here, but I want it overdue. I'm just going to go into here and I'm going to do save as. Now, because workflows can either be triggered manually or by a time or something like that, these workflows do not turn on automatically. And you'll see that after I finish creating this one. That it's turned off right now so that it doesn't accidentally trigger when you're still working on it. So let's go in and edit. Everything's going to be the same except for when we go down to the email. Your course outline is not ready, but your course outline is now overdue. The course outline is overdue. I'll just update my message here. Overdue. Ensure we don't need the ensure all changes stuff, so we can get rid of all that. And once you've completed changes, email us, and there's the link again. So that stuff really pretty simple. Now let's go to the file update the property. Remember that column? We're going to change the status from sent to faculty to sent overdue reminder. It's now overdue. We'll save it. I'm going to go wait till it's finished saving. There we are. I'm going to go back into here, and now let's run the same thing. Give it a second, give it a second. And if it doesn't show, why doesn't it show up? You could try refreshing, but the reason it's not showing up is we didn't turn it on. Let's go back here. You'll see this yellow piece here, and it tells you to say, look at the flow checker, but the first thing you should do is look at turning it on. So if it's not on, turn it on. And notice the flow checker notice and the yellow bar, it all disappeared. So it's now effective and available. Go back here, automate, give it a sec. There it is, overdue. Let her run. Again, this is a new flow, so we have to give it the permissions to go ahead. No message there, so we're just going to run the flow. Go to my email here. Course is overline's overdue. There's the message, it's overdue. You can bold it, customize it, whatever you want. In the subject line, I use emoticon, so I put angry faces, it's overdue. And then let's take a look at our status. Quick refresh of the screen. Sent to overdue. Last step is sending the document for approval to a manager. So we're going to use the flow out of the Power Automate. If you try and use it through here, this flow for whatever reason seems to have some kind of error. So, but if you go to the templates that we've done in Power Automate, and the template we're searching for is called Request Manager Approval for a Selected File, not the, but a selected file. We'll go ahead and open that up. Again, we're going to run through the same steps where we have to have the different applications. Notice it's a little more complicated because we're using SharePoint, we're using Office 365 lookups, notifications, approvals, and the mail. And approval is an app. It's actually an app part of Teams. So when you pop this screen out, sometimes if you have a smaller screen, it may look blank. Just kind of scroll to the right there and you'll find it. So here's the steps. Let's find a file, get the properties of the file, and then from there, I want you to go and set out an approval based on different criteria. So we're just going to go through the steps, and I'll show you where I kind of tweak things and move things differently. So straightforward, we have to go in and select all the different pieces in here again. And instructor, going to go into this site, this document library. Instructor. Condition not found basically says if this page doesn't exist, then don't run it. That's what this kind of works for. But if it does exist, do these steps here. So the steps are get my profile, get my manager. So it's actually going to go and look for my manager. Now, I'm going to go into here and basically this is the manager here. This is the email. I don't want it sent to my manager. My manager is not involved in this process. So I'm going to remove this. And I'm going to throw in TS test staff at mcewen.ca. Now, the email there, I'm right now working on my personal McEwen account. So this is going to that test account, and we'll be jumping back and forth between that. So when I run this, it's going to send this there. But I actually want to do a couple of things here. I want to have the statuses here change depending on where I am in the process. So once I am sending it off to the manager to approve, I want to change the status. So I'm going to go right here in this step and add an action. Remember that action we had SharePoint was the application we're working with. And from SharePoint, we're going to update the properties. Point it to our site. So Power Automate, because this is where the stuff's going to happen, is on that site. And instructor, the ID, obviously again, we have that file ID for a selected file. We grab that. And our status value, we're going to change that to sent for approval. So it's going to make that change. It's going to send it to the approval process, which means that end person will get an email as well as a message in Teams. Now, what happens next? Well, as part of the approval process, they can approve it or not approve it. If they don't approve it, a message comes back to me as the requester saying this hasn't been approved, and then we just kind of start the process over again. However, if it does get approved, so that's where the yes comes in, basically send an email to Trevor saying this has been approved. But this is where I'm going to add another step. I'm going to add the step where we have go into SharePoint. Someday I'll spell SharePoint correctly. I'm going to update. And remember, this now has been approved. So quite frankly, we've completed everything. So I'm going to go into my Power Automate training site. There's my library. There's the ID of the file. Make sure you get the right one. And my status now has been changed to completed, because it's been completed. It's been approved by my manager or whoever I'm working on. I'll save this. Quickly run the flow checker because it is kind of complicated. Everything looks fine there. Let's go back to here. And TS staff is the account there. So let's send off that piece there. Request manager approval. You know what? Let me go back into here because it looks like there's a couple different ones in here. And yes, there's an example, a great example where there's 3 of them already in my flows. So I want to rename this properly. And I'm going to preface this with, as we said before, come on, SW2. Whoops. 2 space. So that's my name. Save. And we'll go back here. Automate. SW2 request. Let's let her run. First time again, so it's going to pop up asking permissions to go ahead and run it. There it is. Hit continue. I can put a message in there. Please look this over. This is a mandatory field, so you have to put something in right now. And let's go back. So one thing I want to show you is at the top here, if I go back in time here, this is my kind of like my running information page. But down here, it shows you every time that this piece has run. So there's all my information from that shows it every time it's attempted to run that script. So we're still looking at it running here. Now I heard a noise. I'm just going to pop over to TS here. So my test account. So let's go into email. There's the approval. So I can approve or reject it. I should have something. Yep, there it is there under my activities. Trevor sent you a request here. And I can approve it. So those are both the same. Let's go back over here to my SharePoint site. It's sent for approval. That's awesome. And I'm going to go and approve this. Doesn't matter whether I approve it from my email or my team, but I'm going to go ahead and approve that here. And momentarily, I'll just quickly refresh this just so we can see it. And there it is. It's completed. We are done. So that's pretty much all the big things that you need to know there. The one thing I will point out is if you take a look here, I'm going to go under these messages here, and I'm going to automate. To remember there were a whole bunch of S2s that were done? Well, yeah, they were done, but they were done by this guy here, so my test account. So right now, those automations that have been created have only available to that person. So to make those available to elsewhere, we have to go into our automation. So I'll go back to Power Automate to my flows. And I'm going to take this one called overdue here just so you can see it. So for each one of these that I want to make available to other users other than me, I'm going to have to go in. Whoops, I clicked in the wrong section. Click on the title. So when you're in your flow here, just click on the title here, not the edit. I have to go in and I can either add another owner. And if I do that, that person has edit access, or run only users. So these are people that can use it, but they can't make any changes. So I'm going to go into there. And there's 2 ways that we can add stuff. We can add it by a person or by a group. So if you've got a team or a Microsoft group, you can put their names in there. They will be able to run that. or you can just apply it to the SharePoint site library. So anyone that's got access to that library can do it. So I'm going to go into here, go Power Automate Training, go into my instructor. I'm going to add that here. So there it's added there, the instructor. I'm going to hit save. Now I'm going to jump back over to Trevor here. And when I go to here, there the other one pops up. So you have to remember to share your workflows with other people if you want them to have access to it. And that pretty much is how you save times with automations in SharePoint.